Imagine discovering a tiny, shivering puppy hidden away in a tree while strolling through your favorite park on a cool evening. Night after night, in a lonely corner. What hidden grief could motivate such a small? Come along with us as we uncover a tale that will inspire your spirit to seek refuge among the stars. Touch your heart with its unadulterated passion and sudden displays of weakness. Every evening, a silent ceremony took place as the sun set below the horizon. While strolling through Maplewood Dog Park, kids played with a small puppy that had velvety, large, soulful eyes and matted fur would find a quiet place under an ancient oak tree in spite of the cool air and, night after night, returning to the light-hearted distractions surrounding him as though he was waiting for someone or something to bring him. Daniel Rivera, a comfort officer, is a committed and sympathetic member of the local. When he initially saw the small puppy, the police officer had been making his regular rounds in the area for a number of. He noticed the puppy's quiet watch in the evenings, with its tiny body snuggled up against the night's chill. The dog's constant presence and silent grief sparked a strong sense of empathy in. One night in particular, Rivera went up to the puppy to give it a warm blanket and some food. Gazed up, eyes full of sorrow, overcome by the unadulterated intensity of the moment the officer suddenly broke. That heartbreaking response, which brought him to tears, signaled the start of his investigation into the mystery surrounding the puppy's overnight refuge would gradually uncover layers of loss that were hidden. Yet, every evening at Maplewood Dog Park, the unanticipated strength of compassion as a silent mystery started to emerge in the park as twilight softened the edges of the day. Once merely a happy haven for families and dogs, it has recently served as the backdrop for an emotional usual, with one small stray passing by unnoticed when ERS and picnickers went by. When the puppy first appeared each night, it had matted, disheveled fur and eyes that were filled with an unfathomable sadness. Take a seat beneath an ancient oak tree away from the playground's cacophony the night following. The cool breeze and the faraway laughing of children's Officer Daniel Rivera did not deter him from returning that night. During his routine, a committed and compassionate member of the local police department had started to notice the puppy. At first, patrols Rivera didn't give it much attention. Maybe the puppy was just lost, seeking refuge. But as the evenings became consistent, he discovered that he was pulled to the picture every time something inside of him was aroused by the puppy's silent vigil. As though, on a night when the park's lamplight was shining, those soulful eyes were softly begging for assistance or company. Officer Rivera made the decision to act after casting soft halos across the kissed grass. He parked his cruiser close to the tree and out, breathing clearly in the cool air as he approached cautiously to avoid frightening the tiny creature. He knelt next to the puppy and gave it a small food packet and a warm blanket. Initially wary, the puppy ultimately let Rivera get close in that. Something in Rivera shattered in a sensitive moment when the officer looked into the puppy's eyes. Overwhelmed by the intense feeling and the obvious suffering in those eyes, he suddenly started crying. Colleagues later reported that the depth of his sympathy broke his normally calm demeanor. The next day, stories of Rivera's emotional encounter started to disseminated across the neighborhood. Residents who frequently visited Maplewood Dog Park were moved by the tale of the sobbing police officer. Filled informal discussions at local cafes and community centers, signifying to many that even those hardened by duties, he was unable to disregard the silent pleas for assistance at. Rivera's other policemen at the police station had conflicting opinions, appreciated his openness, seeing it as evidence that he genuinely cared about his neighborhood, while others were concerned that such Rivera's capacity to enforce the law may be compromised by his emotions. Yet he was adamant about finding out more about the puppy's origins, what caused him to make the park his nightly haven, and whether there was anything that could be done to alleviate his evident anguish in. Officer Rivera started talking to park visitors in an attempt to find answers, and he went up to an old woman named Mrs. "I've seen the little puppy every night," Mrs. Jenkins, who has been feeding the ducks by the park pond for years, said. "I always assumed he was waiting for someone who would never come," and her melancholy tone alluded to her own. Rivera recognized that the puppy's loneliness could serve as a mirror for the forgotten, and Rivera also went to the neighborhood animal shelter to see the underprivileged, where he got to know Carla Martinez, a generous shelter worker who has a strong affection for stray animals. Stated that although the shelter had heard some reports of a little puppy straying close to the park, he had never been brought in. He seemed too proud or afraid to get near us, she noted softly. Caressing a rescued dog, who could have a tail he can't express verbally. Her remarks strengthened Rivera's determination to assist the dog on his own terms while the puppy maintained his regular ritual without interruption, going back to the same location beneath the oak tree every night as Riva is now more interested than ever if he is bound by an invisible link to his past. Started keeping a little notepad in his police car to record his observations, recording information about the puppy's behavior, the climate, and any interactions he had with park visitors. As time went on, trends showed that the puppies appeared to shiver more on very cold nights, and occasionally his eyes would seem more depressed following a heavy downpour. Rivera pondered whether the weather could be a subliminal clue of his emotional state. Reflect the puppy's internal conflict. As Rivera dug more into the mystery, he became more and more responsible for the small animal. His nightly interactions with the puppy were times that went beyond simple patrol observations. Awoke his own humanity. He started to think that maybe this little creature wasn't just a stray, but a representation of. In the middle of these reflections, Officer Rivera decided to dedicate his life to providing hope to individuals who felt abandoned. Try to find the puppy's origins during his off-duty hours. Was the puppy lost or abandoned? As Rivera set out, the question whirled around in his head. Home that once loved him? Resolutely the next evening, equipped with a warm blanket, food, and with a compassionate heart, a new chapter was beginning as Maplewood Dog Park became quiet under the stars. Chapter where changes were promised as a result of one cop's resolve to comprehend and ease a Ray's silent grief, in ways that none of them had yet anticipated in the days after Officer Rivera's emotional meeting with the silent mystery surrounding the stray puppy at Maplewood Dog Park revealed more about what happened. A tangle of fresh inquiries replaced what had started off as a series of silent observations. They brought with them unforeseen disputes and encounters that would try Rivera's determination to find out more about Rivera. The puppy's origins officer started spending his off-duty time investigating each lead he made multiple times. Return trips to the park in the hopes of spotting hints that could provide insight into the pup's background one cold night while Rivera spotted something while placing a warm blanket and a little bag of food close to where he usually sits beneath the oak tree. Unusual. A ripped bit of cloth clinging to a bush close by. He became suspicious after seeing a lovely sweater in a faded blue color, wondering if the puppy had once belonged to a caring. The discovery led to a series of encounters with locals as his family now frantically looked for him. Officer Rivera started off by speaking with Mrs. Jenkins, a longtime park regular. The sweet elderly woman who fed the ducks at the pond brought up memories of a young child who, she added softly, her eyes watering, used to come here with her pup. They would sit beside. I never saw them leave that oak tree laughing together. But one day the pup vanished, leaving her with just hazy memories. Suggested a previous relationship that could account for the puppy's nightly watch at the same time, Rivera returned to the neighborhood animal shelter, where Carla Martinez, a volunteer, gave him a cordial welcome. Carla acknowledged that she had been thinking about that small guy while closely examining a leaflet for lost dogs. According to some of our volunteers, the puppy has been seen close to a neighborhood where families once resided. However, each time we attempt to pursue the trail, it disappears. Her remarks strengthened Rivera's resolve, and he sensed that. Conflict also started to surface within Rivera's own life, with each detail serving as a piece of a bigger puzzle that needed to be solved. Some policemen in the department appreciated his caring demeanor and considered his vulnerability as a strength, while others were worried that during a routine, his emotional participation may impair his professional judgment. I admire what you're doing, Daniel. During roll call one frosty morning, the senior officer, Sergeant Lopez, drew Rivera aside. But don't let your heart get in the way of your duty. We're here to enforce the law, he continued in a calm, low voice. Get caught up in sentimentality. Rivera's answer was forceful but understated. Sometimes, Sergeant's concern is just what the law needs, he responded, his eyes showing a glimmer of resolve, of sorrow. The short conversation created a tension that would seethe beneath subsequent encounters. Meanwhile, while Rivera followed the trail, posters about the distraught police officer and his people in the neighborhood showed their support and appreciation for the uncommon devotion to a stray puppy by sending sincere. Others questioned their messages and pictures of comparable experiences from their own life. The online discussion noted that a police officer shouldn't be so emotionally invested in what they referred to as a stray. Rivera is under pressure to manage public perception while still attempting to learn the truth about the pups. Rivera was sitting in his patrol car, one especially tense evening in history. He got a call from a young man who was looking over his notebook, which was full of observations and sketches of the stray's behavior. Lisa, a woman, reported seeing the small dog in a neighborhood outside of town, a location where, after families moved away, numerous abandoned pets were frequently left behind, including Lisa's. Earnest Officer Rivera's voice sounded hesitant, but I believe I know something about. My neighbor told me about a family that used to reside in the area, and their dog vanished, she continued, referring to that puppy. Inexplicably, following a terrible accident, this fresh lead offered hope, and, meanwhile, Rivera scheduled a meeting with Lisa for the next day in the hopes that her story would provide a more complete picture. The next afternoon, in a small suburban park far away, the pups passed. Lisa and Rivera strolled along a peaceful route while sipping lukewarm cups from Maplewood coffee from a local cafe. Lisa detailed her neighbor's tale of how, after its owner experienced a personal tragedy, the cherished family pet disappeared, leaving behind only pieces of. Rivera discovered a faded sweater that matched the fabric of the revelation, along with sentimental and heartbreaking, implying that the stray puppy could perhaps be the long-lost friend of a family split up by. Rivera experienced a renewed sense of purpose as he meticulously documented each detail, conscious that everything at Maplewood Dog could be altered by this information. Parked that night, when the puppy was once more tucked under the oak tree, Rivera came over with his customary kind. He brought food and a blanket this time, but he also promised to provide answers while keeping an eye on the pups. He became aware that every night's silent vigil was a plea for acknowledgement of a past that had been. The park, with its echoes of laughter and recollections of the past, has now been forgotten. Contained a tale of love loss, the secret of a lost family, and a story of redemption awaits in this complex labyrinth of clues, conflicts, and Officer Rivera's quest to learn the puppy's origins through gentle interactions had acquired a deep significance, and each discussion, piece of proof, and he got closer to revealing the truth with each sincere conversation, and, by doing this, him to both recreate a lost history and reassert that compassion, no matter how. It is said subtly that it has the capacity to mend even the most severe wounds. Officer Daniel Rivera was just starting to piece together the hints regarding the enigmatic nightly watch of the stray puppy when, one cold evening while meticulously following up, he made a finding that completely changed everything. Rivera saw something glinting close to the base of the ancient oak tree as he circled Maplewood Dog Park. The puppy always slept, and when he cautiously approached, he discovered a tiny warren. A small engraved tag was gripped in a leather collar that was partially buried beneath fallen leaves. That had a name, phone number, and, above all, the date. Rivera, fascinated and perceptive, and quickly discovered that it correlated with a long-forgotten tragedy in the community's past. Rivera returned the collar to his station for a closer look, thinking that this might hold the secret to the puppy's origin. He carefully inspected the tag beneath the fluorescent lights. When he read the memorial for Emma, the name resonated deeply with him, but he was unable to fully. Given its importance, Riva initially started looking through ancient community records in an effort to find answers. Using local newspaper archives, the information he discovered was devastating and, shockingly, over 2 decades ago, a cherished young child named Emma had disappeared inexplicably. The case had captivated the neighborhood and her for years. Despite the investigation's eventual failure, the disappearance had left local memories haunting whispers and family. Emma's story had been preserved by accounts, and Rivera learned that Emma had a reputation for having a strong bond with her tiny, unkempt puppy who had supported her through happiness and sadness. The puppy was last seen with Emma on the day she vanished, leaving a mystery in her wake, according to tales from the past. That, although Rivera pondered the revelation, no one had ever been able to solve. He felt a rush of contradictory feelings. The stray puppy that had warmed his heart was more than just a homeless animal, but Emma may have found a lifelong companion in it. Memory of a catastrophe that had previously wreaked havoc on the town, the insight. Every night when the puppy slept by himself beneath the oak tree, he was hit severely. Perhaps he was waiting in his own quiet way for a family that had been ripped apart by loss to come back. Rivera contacted a local investigator who had previously collaborated on the cold case in order to manage his escalating emotions. After reviewing witness accounts and historical facts, it quickly became clear that the dog had not been. After Emma vanished, there were reports that she had been adopted or moved. That the animal, maybe alarmed by what had happened that tragic day, had strayed into the park and over the twist continued to exist for years as a silent protector of Emma's memory. Vera discovered a faded photo hidden in a box of old case files at the station as he looked deeper. Picture shows Emma grinning while holding a small dog that looked somewhat like the stray, who was now sleeping. The image was nearly eerily clear beneath the oak, as though time itself had captured a moment of innocence that had perished due to tragedy. The picture provided indisputable evidence that connected Emma's lost past to the stray puppy. Officer Rivera's nighttime patrol was rocked by the revelation, and he cried during his moment under the lamplight. Persistent search for solutions all came together in this one devastating realization. The puppy wasn't merely a stray. He represented a lost love, a living reminder of a broken vow, and possibly a plea for reconciliation. That the idea that this tiny baby might be the last connection to Emma has long been longed for by the community. And her family turned Rivera's inquiry into a personal crusade for justice rather than just a random act of goodwill. Truth and closure, committed to do everything in his power to repair what had been lost, and more than ever, power to bring Emma's memory back to her lost tranquility. He started getting in touch with local historians, are contacting people who may have recollections of Emma's life, and maybe establishing his mission was initially inspired by a little memorial in the park to honor her memory. A silent emotional response had developed into an effort to heal a community that had been plagued by unsolved sorrow at that crucial moment when the collar was in his grasp and the faded tag looked promising. True's Officer Rivera understood that the most profound mysteries can occasionally be solved by the tiniest clues, and for the stray, spending each night under the oak tree as a puppy was more than simply a way to spend time alone. It was a silent vigil for a little one who had gone missing. Girl, and her memory now endured in each tender-poured print and each tearful look exchanged by a police officer who refused to allow the past to slip away following the aura surrounding Maplewood and the shocking discovery that connected Emma's long-forgotten sorrow to the stray dog. The dog park and the entire neighborhood underwent a significant transformation after the revelation, which had an impact on many facets of society. Required everyone to face their feelings, from the seasoned law enforcement officers to the regular park visitors. Officer Daniel Rivera has been long hidden under routines and bureaucracy, reeling from the sad thoughts of a little girl who had gone missing and the discovery of the engraved collar, battling a significant personal obligation in the precinct while co-workers talked about typical situations. Rivera's thoughts were focused on Emma and the puppy's silent vigil. In private talks with his girlfriend, he admitted, "I never thought a stray could." Every night, that small puppy is not simply resting. He's carrying a lot of grief, waiting as though attempting to evoke a recollection of a past love. His sensitivity startled some of his peers. Officers were originally surprised by his emotional transparency, but they eventually started to recognize the breadth of his compassion. Even Sergeant Lopez, who had previously warned Rivera, cautioned against allowing emotion to cloud his judgment and gave a silent nod of comprehension, suggesting that perhaps this situation isn't only. He subsequently whispered that it was more about providing a community with the much-needed closure than it was about upholding the law. The community's response was just as strong at Maplewood outside the precinct. Longtime visitors to the dog park whispered to one another as they observed the stray puppy's nighttime routine evolve into anything rich in significance. Mrs. Jenkins, the kind old lady who had provided for years, park's ducks were observed having quiet conversations with other park visitors. When Emma used to visit here with her small dog, she remembered, her voice quivering with nostalgia, and it saddens me to consider that this unfortunate dog could be her missing friend, Heart, but also serves as a reminder to me of how resilient love is. Her words inspired others as they reverberated in the clear evening air to discuss their personal stories of hope and grief, while local animals. Kayla Martinez, a shelter volunteer, was overwhelmed with calls and messages from individuals affected by the story that feels personal. As other volunteers have mentioned, she clarified in a discussion with co-workers at the shelter the notion that a lost child could be related to an abused child. It's almost as if the has come to represent the beauty and suffering of our common history. Carla planned a small community event at. Residents are being invited by the shelter to share their memories of Emma and talk about how the tragedy has affected them. Highlighted a shared desire to mend old wounds via heartfelt memories and silent declarations of hope. Back at the police station, Rivera discovered that the revelation caused other cops to reflect. Examining historical documents and newspaper clippings on Emma's disappearance late at night in an open, did he acknowledge in a talk with a reputable mentor detective moralist that this case is more than just a stray puppy's mystery. I feel like it's about a young girl who was cherished and then lost, driven to treat her tale with the deference it merits. Experienced Detective Morales, of numerous cold cases, acknowledged that this was a demand for compassion rather than just a formality. Went beyond routine police work when the story started to appear in local media. Local authorities acted, including Charlotte Green, who has long been a steadfast supporter of openness and change. Arranged a memorial service at Maplewood Dog Park, which took place on a clear Saturday morning, brought together former residents, their bereaved families, and those who had previously known Emma in. A modest plaque was lovingly unveiled during a quiet, heartfelt ceremony beneath the oak tree where the puppy rested. In honor of Emma, may all lost souls find their way home. The service offered a sense of relief for people who had been bearing the weight of unresolved grief for a long time, but it also strengthened the idea that a stray puppy, no matter how small, might be a beacon of hope for mending a broken community inside. Discussions over accountability and transparency are sparked by the developing story in Riverdale's local government circles. Rivera, a councilwoman for public institutions, is unrelated to Officer Daniel Rivera, talked fervently during a municipal council meeting about the importance of respecting the past while creating a new course for the future. She firmly said, "We cannot allow silence and neglect to rewrite our history." Despite how tragic it is, this situation offers us a chance to regain trust and to make certain that every voice, no matter how tiny, gets heard as the days became. Weeks after the first shock, all sectors showed a firm resolve. Community leaders, the police department, the shelter, and even the local government started organizing activities too. Rivera's study into Emma's narrative developed into a more extensive community initiative that included exploring historic neighborhoods, collecting oral histories, and looking through historical photos in an effort to bring resolution of an unsolved enigma during these times of group adaptation. Conversations about personal weaknesses that had previously been suppressed by professional politeness were now respected and shared, freely intertwined the strands of individual loss and collective memory, and the collective resolve to see compassion and justice triumph over every tear. Revealed, whether by a police officer in a silent corridor or by an elderly resident at the morning service, support the expanding, realizing that accepting our common humanity with everyone can occasionally result in the most profound healing. Every tender memory, every discussion, and every action taken to reveal the truth about the community and guardians discovered that they were bound together by a shared goal to guarantee Emma's legacy, and a new hope was emerging in the wake of a devastating loss, and the silent vigil of the stray puppy would never be forgotten. One that assured that passion would be evident even in the most obscure places when the community started to With the heartbreaking disclosure of Emma's lost legacy and the puppy's eerie link to her abduction, unexpected subplots and new difficulties began to surface, adding to the mystery and evaluating the participants' commitment to Officer Rivera's investigation. Initially only concerned with determining the stray's beginnings, they soon came into contact with long-forgotten community secrets. When he returned to the spot under the oak tree one evening with newfound vigor, a local historian called Mr. Reed, a quiet guy with extensive knowledge of Ms. Anthony Reed, came up to him. According to Maplewood's background, he had discovered Old Town documents that suggested there is a pattern to this family tragedy that has impacted not only Emma's family, but also a number of nearby homes. Mr. In a quiet voice, Reed revealed that there have been alarmingly many occurrences of missing children and pets over the previous few decades. Comparable details. It raises the question of whether a hidden thread unites these tragedies. This proposal brought a larger subplot that suggested Emma's case might not be unique, but rather a part of a string of enigmatic occurrences impacting the neighborhood. Rivera was compelled to investigate this idea and started looking through public archives and speaking with senior citizens, while Mr. Reed volunteered to provide historical records that could, shedding light on Maplewood's ongoing pattern of loss, while also generating whispers in the local. Carla Martinez, a volunteer at the animal shelter, received an anonymous report that claimed that the stray dog had previously been a member of a litter owned by a renowned local breeder who had inexplicably. The tip indicated that the breeder's financial situation had deteriorated decades ago. A litter may have been forced to separate due to ruin and eventual disappearance, leaving behind orphan puppies. Carla started a covert investigation into the breeder's past after being prompted by a revelation to contact previous. As Carla put the pieces of the scandal together, local veterinarians and family members recalled it, found evidence that the breeder had engaged in dubious activities, possibly even trying to conceal or falsify documents when the catastrophe occurred in the midst of these developments. Olivia Reed, who was relentless, started to step up their coverage of Olivia, obtain a number of anonymous emails from Riverdale that included excerpts from internal memoranda and financial records. One communication in particular from Medical Center that alluded to cover-ups and poor management stated that funds intended for compassionate care and community outreach have inexplicably vanished over time, indicating that influential people in the organization may have purposefully suppressed creative initiatives like Project Compassion. Olivia's essays began to garner more readers, which increased the hospital's workload, administration, and igniting discussions about ethics and transparency in municipal government. As the inquiry into the police tensions also increased as a result of the puppy's origins and the associated historical tragedies. When department personnel saw Rivera's commitment and emotional fragility, they became more supportive of his quest, but others, constrained by conventional thinking, questioned if. A veteran officer said at a late-night briefing that his personal involvement was impairing his judgment. Our job is to conduct this. Emotive probes are not our business. Internal conflict compelled Rivera to deal with skepticism in addition to exterior difficulties. A personal redemption storyline at Maplewood Dog Park among his own ranks started to reveal Mrs. Jenkins, the long-standing park frequenter who is famous for providing food for the ducks, appeared as a surprising pivotal figure, revealing that she had previously had a close relationship with Emma's family, having provided for Emma's pet, and even sharing happy recollections of the little child. Her memories were full of joy, and Rivera's enduring grief gave the impersonal archival documents a human face. Jenkins offered to assist by setting up a small neighborhood group after discovering Mrs. gathering where senior citizens might reminisce and possibly assist piece together Emma's story. In her puppy, this grassroots initiative quickly gathered steam, bringing people from the community together who had been quietly grieving over their lost pasts for a long time. The historical convergence of these subplots, lost trends, the enigmatic breeder's scandal, and the financial issues at internal police discussions at the hospital and local memories formed a complex network of difficulties, with each new lead having the capacity to either shed light on long unknown facts could cast the inquiry into greater doubt for Officer Rivera. The trip wasn't It had evolved from a single attempt to aid a desolate outlaw to a complex endeavor to restore a town. During these volatile times, Rivera is plagued by decades of unresolved questions. Found comfort in the unwavering assistance of a few reliable friends, a local historian, a sympathetic shelter volunteer, and Mrs. Jenkins's kind words of support. Together, they established a tiny network devoted to upholding the truth and making sure that every bit of evidence, no matter how small, would add to a greater story of recovery and accountability. The stray puppy resumed his regular vigil under the watchtower as dusk descended over Maplewood. Oak Tree unaware of the whirlwind of inquiries and arguments about him, but in his quiet observation he had evolved into the catalyst for change and a representation of the continuing strength of compassion and memory in the midst of the unrelenting march. Shortly after the startling finding of the puppy's connection to a long-forgotten tragedy, not only did the investigation and community response uncover new leads, but sometimes intense emotional disputes between everyone concerned. The stress of balancing unpleasant memories with a tapestry of personal struggles resulting from a yearning need for closure affected everyone, from Officer Rivera to Sir Daniel Rivera, the community advocate's officer and park regular, whose first emotional collapse had clearly shown a shift from the stoic persona that was expected of him, and he was now more and more divided between his. Late one evening, after going over witness testimony and considering the case's emotional weight and professional obligation, images from the past showing Emma and her missing pet Rivera sitting by themselves in his patrol car, his internal monologue, written in a journal, exposed the depths of his psychological conflict. I feel like I'm seeing a silent appeal from the past every time I see the small puppy lying beneath the oak tree that still plagues us all. But how can I swear to uphold the law and let my feelings to get in the way override my judgment? This internal struggle caused him to wonder if he was jeopardizing his profession by letting his emotions lead him. Rivera's co-workers' inquiry at the precinct provided conflicting. Some younger policemen responded by expressing admiration for his vulnerability. Also related anecdotes of personal sorrow that were relevant to the case. One cop recounted how a street dog had provided him some consolation during a personal problem, while another revealed that he had witnessed the significant effects of senior cops, who had been in charge of upholding order for years, saw his emotional participation and skepticism. Sergeant Lopez was once informally cautioned by a mentor. I'm concerned about this case because we're here to enforce the law, not to get caught up in emotion. Might make such distinctions unclear to you. Rivera was trapped in the middle of contradicting recommendations. A struggle at Maplewood between a growing dedication to justice based on empathy and professional duty. Longtime dog park patrons started to offer their own memories of the park's past, showing how it was once. Many people in the neighborhood miss Jenkins, who is remembered as a location of bittersweet memories, because Emma's kind disposition and daily ritual of feeding the ducks were apparent during a small gathering. I recall when Emma used to visit here with her small dog, she remarked quietly to a group of neighbors, "I always considered that pair to be a lighthouse of innocence, and now that I know that this stray could be that same puppy, I feel both sad and somehow hopeful." Those in attendance were deeply moved by her words of consolation as they recollected their own experiences of loss and the recovery that followed. Carla Martinez, a volunteer at the local animal shelter, likewise believes in the importance of shared memories. Dealt with her personal emotional struggles while devoted to the well-being of each stray who entered the shelter. Carla had become engrossed in the tale of the enigmatic puppy, but when unidentified sources suggested that the animal might have been abandoned in terrible circumstances related to Emma's disappearance, she began to wonder about the boundaries of how can I strike a balance between my need to look after these animals and my desire to learn the unpleasant truth about their pasts. During a late-night discussion with other volunteers, she asked out loud. Carla's uncertainty mirrored that of many who worked on the investigation's outskirts, divided between giving emergency care and exploring a history that could bring old wounds back to life at a particularly sensitive time. A brief memorial service was held in the park by the community, attended by locals and former neighbors. Emotions were running high as authorities gathered under the oak tree, discussed Emma's legacy, and the long-lasting effects of. During the event, a young guy stood in for the lost bond between a youngster and her pet. Cried as he described how his life had been impacted by his own experience with loss and how the picture of the puppy's quiet vigil told him that despite the most profound sadness, there's always hope because we are all bound together by our common. His voice broke with emotion as he spoke about grief and our ability to heal. Comments set off a series of sincere admissions that brought together a wide range of people whose lives had been impacted by such losses. In the midst of these intricate human relationships, the media keeps amplifying the emotional landscape, following up with impacted community members. Olivia Reed found a chorus of voices that are finding it difficult to balance their own sorrow with the public's demand for responsibility in one. In a moving interview, an elderly woman explained how seeing the stray puppy every night brought back memories of A. She was both relieved and hurt by the reminder of the long-lost family member as the investigation. Every person was compelled to face their own vulnerabilities as each new revelation was pressed upon. Rivera Carla Mies Jenkins. When the case was so profoundly personal, even doubtful officers were compelled to reconsider what it meant to serve their community. The emotional conundrums that arose from juggling duty with personal history and collective remembrance. The need for truth, professionalism, sensitivity, and compassion, despite the possibility of reviving old wounds, became crucial to the narrative as the enigma surrounding the puppy's origins itself. During these tumultuous times, each tear shed, every silent nod of comprehension, and the whispered talk highlighted the fact that occasionally the best strength is found in accepting one's feelings and the bonds that bind the community together. Eventually, suffering and a shared goal for recovery made people realize that vulnerability was a strength rather than a weakness. Catalyst for transformation as the inquiry into the enigmatic or heightened undercurrent of the stray dog started to ripple through the Maplewood Dog Park and the neighborhood, where there had been a silent vigil of grief. That hope was now being replaced by a string of unexplained incidents and cryptic hints that pointed to a more sinister secret. Concealed beneath the surface one cloudy night, as Officer Rivera returned to the oak tree, holding his camera and diary, he saw an odd disturbance on the grass in a tiny, isolated UL. He discovered multiple pieces of paper partially concealed under fallen leaves and twigs in the corner next to where the dog rested. Curiously, these pieces were encrusted with hurriedly written notes, an address, and a date that appeared to. Rivera's heartbeat accelerated when a long-forgotten local tragedy occurred. Couldn't help but wonder if these documents had anything to do with Emma's case and her missing friend, or if they suggested, while Rivera was putting the pieces together that same evening, something much more sinister. On his work phone, he received an anonymous text message about the torn fabric from his prior discovery. Just read this. Not all secrets remain hidden. Pay attention to where the shadows congregate. The message's enigmatic nature added a terrifying element to the mystery of who sent it and what they were. Rivera felt a tense mixture of resolve and fear when he was warned about the text, and he knew he had to follow this new path, even if it means going into previously unspoken parts of the community. In the days that followed, some park visitors reported seeing signs of secret activity near the dog park. After the park had closed, witnesses reported seeing a person in a dark jacket loitering close to the oak tree. Individual was moving very carefully, almost as if they were attempting to avoid spotting a jogging, so they slowed down too. He caught his breath and remembered that, while it was difficult to tell, I believe I saw someone hiding close to the tree. We're keeping a close eye on the area, and these fragmented and unverified views swiftly found their way into social media networks and local online forums where concerns regarding covert probes and hidden intentions first surfaced. Carla Martinez, a volunteer at the neighborhood animal shelter, received another anonymous tip to swirl. This time the letter arrived by email and included a scanned copy of a faded photo of a tiny puppy within striking likeness to the stray, but taken in a neighborhood gathering years ago. According to the email, which was signed solely with the initials V. Cedars, the dog in the originally belonged to a litter from a now-defunct breeder whose family had connections to an unresolved child abuse case. Absence in the region, Carla's hand shook when she showed her coworkers the picture, which not only brought back memories of lost innocence, but it also suggested a potential link between the stray's ancestry and a more sinister era in Maplewood's history. While Officer Rivera conducts an internal inquiry, started to garner attention in his own department. During a regular briefing, a junior officer said in a hushed voice, "I've heard that certain police officers have been looking through old case files pertaining to Emma, the missing child, and her dog. Do you believe that the puppy might be more than just a stray?" The remark caused some anxiety too. Senior authorities warned the crew against looking into old, unresolved cases. May cause issues that should be avoided, but others understood Rivera's resolve to adhere to all lead, regardless of how unnerving, as though Olivia's predicament weren't complicated enough. Local investigative journalist Reed, who has been following the case since its beginning, made the announcement on her well-known blog. Said she had been notified of a covert gathering that was set to happen close to Maplewood Dog Park. The tip stated that some disillusioned former law enforcement officers and a group of local activists were preparing to, later that week, meet at a darkly lit community center to talk about the reality. Olivia's blog entry on the shadows was written in an anxious and mysterious, swiftly gained popularity among locals who were desperate for clarification, and the media frenzy grew. With each new clue that the public discovers, the authorities are under increasing pressure to solve the mystery. Bits of paper, the unidentified text, the mysterious person in the park, and the faded. The stakes increased with the images, and even the tip that was leaked regarding a covert meeting. Officer Rivera was pulled further into a maze of hints that appeared to entwine the personal. Emma's tragedy combined with more extensive and unsettling aspects of the local past. Once a peaceful haven, the park was being transformed into a set for a secret drama in which every shadow could reveal a. Rivera was aware that he needed to exercise caution when following the anonymous warning because any rumor could result in a reveal. Implied that influential people would have a stake in keeping these things a secret. But as he went over he kept a journal and went over the facts again, feeling a strong desire to learn the truth. Every action he performed not only bringing him one step closer to unraveling the stray's origins, but also ran the risk of revealing long-suppressed wounds that could. Fragile the stray puppy was the one who tore the community apart in this tumultuous environment where emotions were running high. Kept up his nighttime watch under the oak tree, sleeping peacefully and quietly despite the escalating storm all around him. Guardian of recollections of a vanished past, and possibly a lighthouse for a day when the truth would be liberated as the unsettling hints and anonymous suggestions kept spreading the tale of the stray puppy and its eerie link to. The investigation into Emma's lost case started to unexpectedly connect the lives of other people. No longer simply Officer Rivera, it had developed into a group endeavor that united the community. Former inhabitants, as well as doubtful insiders, who now discovered common ground in. At the core of this developing story was their quest for healing and the truth. The lovely old lady who had long visited Maplewood Dog Park, Mrs. Jenkins. She reminisced about Emma with other regulars over tea in the park's little pavilion. "I recall how," Emma remarked gently, her voice full of nostalgia, "I used to laugh when I played with my little dog right here." The touching tales of Mrs. Jenkins struck a deep chord with a group of local activists who had been gathering to talk about the unsolved mysteries of Maplewood's history. Their gatherings, which were held in a small community center, turned into an informal forum where archival research and personal memories collided. They started tying together pieces of memories with the current clues that connect the ripped fabric that Rivera discovered to a child's old sweater in a faded family portrait, and even connecting the enigmatic address on the paper scraps with a neighborhood that has been abandoned for a long time. That formerly flourished with life at the same time in the neighborhood animal shelter. Carla Martinez, a volunteer. The drive to learn more about the puppy's history, since they were interested by the anonymous tip that linked the stray. Carla contacted former staff members of a closed breeder's facility in a discreet manner in response to a scandal. Through casual visits and phone chats, she learned that the breeder had already lost custody. of multiple litters as a result of one former caregiver's financial and legal issues, revealed that there were rumors that the puppies were dispersed when the family disintegrated, and one of them was never reclaimed. Carla's inquiry brought a fresh dimension to the mystery that was developing, implying that the stray could be a part of a larger pattern of loss in addition to being related to Emma. Originating from that turbulent period, Officer Rivera proceeded to record his notepad, which is now filled with details from his careful nightly observations. Considering the weather, remarks made by park visitors, and the actions of the stray, developed into a patchwork of minor hints that, on a calm afternoon at the precinct, started to create a bigger picture. Officer Simmons, his colleague, said that he had previously believed that cases such as these were simply about one lone animal, but it seems like they're touching on something far deeper now: memories of broken families and communities. Tragically, the two officers developed an unforeseen kinship as a result of their talk, bridged the gap between Rivera's personal empathy and professional detachment. His unit's resolve to find the truth served as a unifying theme, gradually changing attitudes, even among others who were first dubious of his emotional commitment, such as the local media, led by in order to make the connections, intrepid journalist Olivia Reed set up a roundtable debate, inviting area historians and former law enforcement officers to a community hall, and even members of the impacted families, during which time contentious but fruitful discussions took place. A former investigator recounted how unresolved local crimes frequently involved incidents of missing children and missing pets. He claimed that Olivia's family never found closure, and it seems as though every stray that shows up here has a story to tell. The capacity to combine these first-hand accounts with concrete proof not only attracted a wider audience, but also motivated several people in the community came forward with their own memories and documents, and her blog articles started to include scanned pictures of faded photos, ancient newspaper clippings, and even scribbled notes. Contributions from locals remembering Emma's terrible disappearance enhanced the story, transforming the inquiry into a genuine community endeavor at a later neighborhood gathering that miss. The activist leader Charlotte Green, who had already become a vital link, added a number of new voices to the chorus. "We all have fragmented family stories," a young mother said tearfully as she described her childhood. "Fragments of the past that we would like to comprehend more fully." This inquiry isn't limited to a single case. It's about. Her remarks resonated, recovering our collective memory and resulting in the creation of a specialized online, a forum where locals could post their memories, photos, and even old home videos in confidence. This digital collection swiftly developed into a wealth of personal history, strengthening the bonds between the impacted lives. By the incidents of that long-ago disaster in these exchanges, the lines separating private mourning from public, the stray puppy's nightly vigil beneath the oak tree started to become hazy with accountability. Once a single act of survival, it now symbolized the community's desire for peace with its history. Shared memory, each tear shed during a public gathering, and each piece of evidence added to an expanding network of people bound together by their shared resolve to discover the truth. As the sun began to drop over Maplewood Dog Park once more, it became evident that what had begun as an investigation turned from a lone wanderer into a campaign that brought together old neighbors, law enforcement historians, and activists working to reassemble the pieces of a lost legacy. The complex network of subplots and individual relationships not only bolstered the inquiry, but also held the prospect of repairing a community that had been plagued by loss for a long time, and the chill of autumn exacerbated the scattered strands of the long-suppressed tragedy, and the investigation started to collide in a boiling pot of strife. The nightly watch of Emma the stray dog and the new clues now compelled a clash between those who are longing for healing through the truth and those who are committed to keeping unpleasant secrets. Officer Daniel Rivera called a spontaneous gathering with a small group of like-minded people one cloudy evening. Colleagues at the station, Rivera lay out the most recent information with his notebook open and his voice low but resolute. Developments: a torn piece of paper with an enigmatic address, and a faded photo. connecting the puppy to Emma's history and quotes from seasoned park visitors. Every hint that Rivera provided indicates that this is about a family that has been shattered by. His fervent appeal to his fellow police provoked both grief and a community left with unresolved questions. While some were moved by his belief, others were concerned that investigating past, unresolved issues could make it difficult to distinguish between duty and internal disputes within the police department started to emerge, and senior officials warned that, in a heated debate, such emotive inquiries could divert them from their primary duties. Sergeant Lopez made the following argument in the break room. We have our hands full with current cases looking into old tragedies now. No matter how tragic, it could compromise our focus, but younger officers and even some more experienced. Reluctantly, co-workers came to concur with Rivera's assertion that Emma should receive justice and that the community was paramount, and this ideological divide posed a challenge to the department's unity, with hushed discussions reverberating in silent corridors beyond the communities. At a town hall meeting hosted by activist Miss Charlotte Green, the response became more divisive. Emotions ran high as residents shared their personal stories in front of a passionate throng at the local community center. Recollections of Emma and the open wounds from previous losses weave. Been kept silent for too long, a local mother said, her voice trembling with sorrow and resolve. We might finally start to heal if the truth about Emma and that small dog comes out. But other more conservative locals contended that bringing up previous grievances could revive wounds that had permitted them to proceed over time, and contentious discussions erupted with some, claiming that the investigation was a publicity gimmick, while others called for openness regardless of the possible harm it could inflict. In the meantime, beneath Maplewood Dog Park, a once calm space was turned into a place of whispered secrets and sly looks, according to numerous park visitors. After closing time, a shadowy person wearing a dark jacket was observed loitering close to the oak tree, a presence that only increased the discomfort in the community, and local internet forums became a hive of conjecture. Was this individual associated with those attempting to censor the truth, or was it just another spirit lost in the currents of a long-forgotten incident at Carla's local animal shelter? Martinez became embroiled in yet another dispute, even though she had become more supportive of revealing. Some volunteers were concerned about revealing too much of the puppy's origins. The very creatures they came to assist us care for could be overwhelmed by their traumatic history. Yes, one volunteer argued about these species, but we must exercise caution so that humans don't. Carla believed that the act of rescuing lives was overshadowed by sadness. Knowing the whole narrative was crucial to giving the right care and possibly even bringing missing families back together. As Officer Rivera now feels increased strain on all fronts as these confrontations reach a crescendo. Received an urgent call from a local historian who had discovered an archival record and became more emotionally committed than before, connecting the enigmatic address on the ripped documents to a rundown area that was formerly well known for its close-knit families. The historian's voice shook with both joy and sadness as he stated that this speech might possess the secret to Emma's tale, which would help to explain why the small dog still comes here each night as though it's. Rivera's heart raced as he waited for a long-lost family, knowing that the mystery was it was going to spread beyond the park and take over a whole community. In the middle of this growing strain, Olivia was under increasing media criticism. Recent blog entries by Reed had generated a lot of discussion, and her most recent expose pledged to investigate further the links between the loss of the stray puppy Emma and the current. Her pieces, which include eerie imagery, discuss internal conflicts among the police force and the neighborhood. Showing the puppy snoozing beneath the oak tree heightened homeowners' public indignation. Started planning demonstrations calling on the local government to pay tribute to Emma's legacy and take significant steps to promote healing. Every fresh lead, every contentious debate, and every impassioned appeal brings back old wounds. As the stakes increased and the community faced a reckoning, would they allow long-held secrets to fester, or eventually, would they face the facts about their shared history? Officer Rivera, who was motivated by both professional beauty and, at the nexus of this historic struggle, was profound human empathy. He was under tremendous pressure to take action because he understood that one mistake could destroy the brittle hope that had been growing. Throughout the weeks, when the sun began to set over Maplewood Dog Park once more, the stray puppy, he sat peacefully beneath the oak tree, unaware of the raging turmoil around him, but his presence had developed into a powerful symbol, a silent plea for justice, remembering, and a community to recover its lost story through internal dissent convergence. With growing media attention and public uproar, everything was set up for a dramatic tipping point that would change this eerie mystery's trajectory permanently as the demands of internal discord and the local media. As the time for decisive action drew closer, tension in Maplewood had escalated to a fever pitch, and everyone was now watching those in charge of determining its destiny at a meeting that was particularly called at the local. Key individuals from the community center, including Officer Daniel Rivera and a few encouraging community activists, Ms. Charlotte Green, local and members of his department, historians, and even animal shelter personnel had a clear objective: to address the long-standing problems at Maplewood Dog Park and determine definitively how to respect. In order to resolve the haunting mystery of the STR puppy, Emma's recollection. The room was filled with a diverse range of people whose voices were united by a common desire for healing and the truth. "We are not here to rehash old sorrows," Miss Green said passionately as she launched the session, looking through the crowd, "but to demand responsibility and make sure that the forgotten memories of our community are eventually given a voice." Her remarks struck a chord with many, inspiring a sense of resolve and, as she revealed a proposal, the air crackled with expectation and trepidation. A thorough public investigation into the events leading up to Emma's disappearance, the ongoing. Officer Rivera then took the floor, his voice steady but full of questions about the vigil and any potential connection between them. "I have been patrolling these grounds for months, and I have seen a little life endure silent grief night with unadulterated feeling. Following the night," he started, "I now think that this pup is not only an estray but a live representation of a family's grief and possibly of the unhealed scars of a community. We must not allow bureaucracy, secrecy, or fear to prevent us from confronting these realities." His impassioned remarks ignited. Despite some skeptics' reservations about rehashing unpleasant situations, there were murmurs of agreement among the guests. The altercation intensified when a local police spokesman ordered an officer with decades of experience contradicted Rivera's theory that we have a duty to enforce the law, not to be influenced by emotion. The officer stated in a calm but stern tone, "Even while your heart is in the right place, we need to think about the possible consequences of digging up old tragedy involving our ongoing activities and active cases." Rivera's eyes flared. He responded resolutely, "I'm not asking for sentimentality I am requesting that we acknowledge the past at the expense of justice in order to draw lessons from it and make sure that every lost." The argument heated up as each voice, forgotten child, and discarded animal received the respect they merited. Rose, a member of the community, spoke about a local mother who was clearly impacted by the tale of Emma, and the stray puppy begged us to allow these stories because I lost my brother in a tragedy that was ignored. By staying concealed, we are merely burying our sorrow even more deeply rather than finding healing. Her passionate appeal, which was full of personal suffering and hope for change, inspired others to make similar. Consequently, the conversation quickly shifted from theoretical theory to the very tangible effects of silence and neglect on individuals, on the general welfare of the society. Throughout this intense discussion, Ms. Charlotte Green made the audacious suggestion that we establish a joint task force. She stated that it was made up of members from law enforcement and community leaders. This task group will supervise a comprehensive independent study of historians, inquiry into the cause of this puppy's nightly vigil, Emma's disappearance, and any associated anomalies. The proposal was greeted by a mixture of cautious optimism and nervousness inside our public institutions. During discussion, a few board members of the community center's organizing committee voiced worries regarding legal consequences of reopening closed cases, but some said it was an essential move. Following a heated round of debates, a vote was held in an effort to rebuild confidence. Most of the gathering that had gathered, including police officers, community organizers, and even those sympathetic. When local government representatives voted in favor of creating the task group, it was a landmark decision. It was a clear declaration that the community would no longer let its past secrets determine its future. The task force's establishment jeered Officer Rivera, who promised to commit all available resources accessible to learn the truth. He stated that this isn't just about a single puppy or a missing girl. Taking back our past and making sure that every little life is free from the whisper of death is remembered and acknowledged. And the audience gave him a roaring round of applause, concluding the work. As the meeting came to an end, the participants scattered into the force's mandate with optimism and resolve. Chilly night air, their expressions expressing the lightness of their newly discovered resolution, as much as the weight of their responsibilities. Rivera left the community center with a stray puppy, whom he now lovingly calls Hope, cuddling up to him. Appeared less savage now, as the promise of change and the warmth of camaraderie took its place in that defining. A public reckoning and final confrontation had been made possible by every hushed word and passionate cry that would finally pave the way for recovery in a neighborhood long plagued by unresolved sadness. As the sun set on a particularly cold evening, the whole community of the tension seemed to be held in check by Maplewood, especially by those congregated near the Maplewood Dog Park, that had been accumulating over weeks of investigations, contentious discussions, and evoking recollections had come to a fever pitch. Every muttered exchange of words, every covert look between, every tear flowed in silent solidarity as park visitors discussed the approaching day when Officer Daniel Rivera would no longer conceal the truth, having led the initiative to establish a joint task force with local historians, law enforcement partners, and community leaders. Stood in the shadow of the park's ancient oak tree, beneath which the stray, on the brink of a pivotal event. Hope, the puppy, slept every night as Rivera went through his collection, featuring images and notes. Each page of his battered notebook contained ripped fragments of clues. A paper with enigmatic addresses and faded pictures connecting the puppy to the untimely death of a young girl named Emma, and locals' recollections of a family that was once united by love but ripped apart by grief at the community center across town where the task force had convened, and there was a sense of urgency in the air. These police department members, local activists, and even skeptics from the local. There was a noticeable combination of nervousness and government in the room as the discussion was prolonged late into the evening. Miss Charlotte Green, whose passionate appeals were infused with determination in every syllable, pacing the platform as she spoke to the assembly tonight. She had assisted in mobilizing support for the investigation, announced that we are on the verge of a revelation because all of the evidence we have found pointed to a past that has too much time has tormented this town, and we are prepared to face our past head-on, no matter how painful it may be. As the conversation shifted to the next important stage, coordinating, the members of the task force exchanged resolute nods. The local media and getting ready to make their findings public, but they appeared to be about to make a breakthrough when a shocking revelation shook the room. One of the senior detectives examining the most recent Maplewood Dog Park security footage found a set of dark pictures taken after the park had closed. The video showed a person in the detective's voice as the dark jacket moves purposefully close to the oak tree, obviously watching the sleeping dog, trembled as he reported that someone who shouldn't be here was present. Someone seems to be keeping an eye on the region, and it's obvious that they want to keep some secrets buried. There was a rumbling of worry among the crowd about the potential that influential people were deliberately attempting to hinder the inquiry, adding an additional level of pressure and anxiety. The knowledge that the enigma was more complex and perilous than anyone had previously realized made Rivera's heart race. Suspected lit his resolve on fire. So we need to be ready, he stated in modest and determined to safeguard our facts and make sure that nobody outside the community center silences the truth. Under the flickering light of a single street lamp, The park's silence was almost unsettling and the night air was crisp. Hope, the stray puppy, continued his nocturnal vigil beside the oak tree without interruption. Yet every sound of leaves and every moving shadow appeared to allude to the existence of invisible local watchers. Residents are increasingly aware of the stress thanks to news updates and social media posts, started to quietly congregate close to the park, and their worried murmurs filled the air as they discussed potential suspects for the enigmatic person shown on the security tape during. Olivia Reed, the tireless journalist whose blog has educated the community in this tense environment, published a breaking news report in which she described the most recent discoveries in the establishment of the task force and the concerning finding of the eerie shadowy figure in the park. She created a narrative about a stray puppy, but it's also about how far people in positions of authority would go to bury unpleasant realities, and we're committed to exposing every detail of what she said. Sparked an online inferno as locals shared the news, calling for responsibility and expressing concern, and wish for justice to prevail when the task force returns to the community center. In order to prepare for greater mobilization, measures were developed to protect all tangible evidence and set up further surveillance. The room was bustling with people discussing the Maplewood Dog Park and setting up a major news conference for the next morning. Every minute of urgent action as members worked with local authorities and legal counsel was added to. As the tension increased, the stakes were higher than ever. This was a fight for more than just Emma's truth, lost friend, but also for the community's integrity and future. As midnight drew near and the Officer Rivera stood outside Hope as the first rays of dawn started to brighten the sky. Once a site of tranquil routine, the park is now shaded by an old oak tree. Rivera's eyes swept across the quiet expanse that had changed into a battlefield of secrets and revelations, pledge reverberating in his mind that he would solve this enigma to the conclusion. Regardless of the risks, the stage was. When the community came together through shared pain and optimism, tension was at its highest, and resolve prepared itself for the unavoidable encounter with a history that would not be concealed as the tension that had been building for weeks finally reached a breaking point when the first rays of dawn appeared over Maplewood Dog Park. Every person affected by the mystery of the stray puppy, the police department, and the community now prepared for the ultimate reckoning, a time when long-suppressed anguish and hidden truths. Officer Daniel Rivera waited at the base of the old oak tree, anticipating a collision of revelation and emotion. Tree where the puppy, who was lovingly called Hope, had sat in peaceful vigil for many nights in his. Tonight, he gripped the tattered leather collar with the engraved tag that had initiated his research, examined each piece of evidence and hints that were spoken during community meetings, and Rivera sensed the burden of accountability more keenly than before. The hints had guided him from the ripped bits of paper with mysterious addresses to old photos that connected the puppy to a terrible missing persons case. He realized it was time to make everything clear to Emma, the child. A sizable audience gathered at the community center across town, where the joint task force had been convened. Law enforcement officials, previous residents, local activists, and even cynical local. When officials gathered for a final press conference, the air was charged with a mix of hope, anguish, and unwavering resolve. Miss Charlotte Green, the neighborhood activist who turned into our community, has suffered for far too long, and the movement's leader stood at the stage with composed authority. Despite our emotional tremors, she started out in quiet and spoke steadily, revealed a tale of treachery and sorrow that has plagued us for decades. Tonight, we insist that At that point, Olivia Reed's live broadcast on local television disclosed a secret fact and celebrated every remembrance. The most important announcement was made by Cut-In in a voice full of sympathy and urgency. Alarming piece of evidence, but security footage that made it obvious that a hooded person was fiddling with old data. The part provided proof that influential people had attempted to conceal the narrative as. The crowd gasped as the footage played on the big screen behind the podium. The pictures were unquestionable, connecting the covert activities to those who want to keep the truth about Emma's disappearance and the lost at bay. Hope was kneeling next to her family, who had once loved her at the Oak Tree Rivera. he whispered. "You've carried so much sorrow on your tiny shoulders tonight." His eyes glistening with unshed tears. He felt as though every heartbeat was a promise that we would make things right at that precise time. With a resolve that pierced his heart, every murmured memory from the community was gathering upon him. He dialed the number from the etched tag out of residual doubts, and the phone rang. After a few uncomfortable moments, a lady who identified herself as Emma's voice responded to Ed. Through tearful confessions and unsteady words, the long-lost aunt disclosed that, in an unfathomable catastrophe, Emma had been separated from her family, and that the aunt's revelation struck shockwaves through the puppy, who had been her constant friend during those last terrible days. Through the task group that was assembled, which verified that the stray was, in fact, a living memorial to a family that had been devastated by. Emotions erupted in the community center as the word circulated. The gathering grew silent, then burst into a chorus of cheers, cries, and serious prayers, according to Councilwoman Rivera. Officer Daniel Rivera, who has no connection to her, spoke to the gathering today, and we can attest to the fact that the agony of the past will no longer be concealed. "We will honor it," she said, her voice resonating in the empty hall. "Emma's memory, and via her, the remembrance of all our community's forgotten souls." At the same time, the conflict between the police department's hardline traditionalists and the sympathetic reformers confronted a senior officer who had earlier doubted Rivera's, publicly expressed regret for the department's previous hesitation, and acknowledged the scope of the probe. Officer Rivera said his voice was strangled with emotion as we stood together today. "We now know that genuine law enforcement is about serving the public interest rather than merely following the law." The culmination of the moment was reached, and I am glad to declare that our community will fully support this probe. When the weight of indisputable information and the enormous backing gave Rivera the confidence to take the podium with Olivia Reed, and Green, and Hope by his side, he spoke. The gathered audience in a voice that was filled with grief and unwavering resolve. "This young dog has demonstrated," he declared, "Emma's narrative ours, showing us that there is hope even on the darkest nights. Every lost memory in the history of the town should be honored tonight." As the press conference came to an end, we pledged to make sure that no act of kindness is ever again silenced. The community center burst into cheers and tears, commemorating the start of a new chapter 4. The disclosures at Maplewood offered Emma and her family justice, as well as a radical shift in the way in that pivotal moment, the community and local institutions will honor the future potential of empathy as the first. Officer Rivera said that the gentle, hopeful light of the dawn filled Maplewood Dog Park. Gazing up at the ancient oak tree, the stray puppy, still soundly sleeping, had come to represent tenacity and Rivera, a truth-bearer, pledged to reveal all secrets and make sure that every whimper of loss was encountered with acts of kindness that touched every heart during the storm of. The community was prepared to rebuild a future where the conflict had reached its peak and the truth had been revealed. Every act of generosity was appreciated, and no tear was ever shed in vain. The dawn of a new era was symbolized by the soft warmth that replaced the cool night air as the sun rose over Maplewood Dog Park. The community's turbulent journey, which started with a stray puppy's nightly vigil, had now come to an end with revelations that gave healing Officer Daniel Rivera hope after decades of silent sadness. Once overcome by emotion and troubled by unresolved issues, she now served as a lighthouse of kindness and persistence. In the days following the dramatic press conference, the whole Maplewood community gradually started to. With the joint task force securely in place, it will mend its broken history. Local leaders, community activists, and even law enforcement officials who had previously expressed skepticism collaborated alongside to pay tribute to Emma's legacy and guarantee that no act of kindness would ever be punished again. The proof that had threatened to destroy the community, but instead acted as the impetus for a radical change. Hope, the stray puppy, has been keeping a somber vigil every night at Maplewood Dog Park. Under the old oak tree, a simple memorial was built with a little plaque that said, "In Emma's loving memory, May all lost souls find their way home in this straightforward way. Nonetheless, a stirring remembrance not only paid respect to a little girl whose absence had plagued the community for years, but honored the tenacity of a neighborhood that had at last decided to confront its traumatic past neighbors, the former park. Regulars and even onlookers would frequently stop at the memorial, their eyes displaying a mixture of optimism and sadness as Officer Rivera carried on with his regular patrols while wearing a red uniform in remembrance of the numerous souls impacted by love and grief. Feeling of direction every night as he walked past the oak tree and caught a sight of Hope soundly sleeping, he was reminded of he had vowed that terrible night to never allow bureaucracy or apathy to suffocate compassion and the evidence. He discovered that the sincere speeches and the weeping confessions had all combined to reveal a single fact that every forgotten memory should have been given a chance to live on, and his co-workers were healed. Motivated by his example, they started approaching their work with greater empathy. Even Sergeant Lopez, who had previously warned Rivera not to let emotion to influence his decisions, is now publicly recognized that empathy is the foundation of genuine service. "We are more than just law enforcement," he said. "In a peaceful time, we also serve as the guardians of the hearts of our community throughout the entire town." The community center, which is now a center of healing and activity, held frequent forums where local leaders, historians, and people convened to exchange historical tales, offering suggestions for a future with greater compassion. These gatherings developed into a grassroots movement that demanded, because of Olivia Reed's ongoing coverage of the story, all public institutions now have greater transparency and reform. Additional insight behind the change, with her interviews and blog entries reiterating the idea that no tragedy should be concealed and no good deed ought to be repressed, in one especially poignant. Later, a former neighbor sobbed as she described how the narrative had assisted her in processing a long-ago loss of her own. "I kept my anguish to myself for years, until she finally came clean," her voice cracking as she spoke today, "and I'm encouraged by the way our community has come together to memorialize Emma and all forgotten souls." Her remarks struck a chord with everyone in attendance, reaffirming the notion that recovery was possible. The broad changes were not limited to the local administration. They were a community journey rather than an individual one, prompted by the public outrage and the indisputable proof of repression and corruption. Started an independent audit of every community institution. The inquiry resulted in important changes. A new advisory board was established to guarantee that policies would now place a higher priority on empathy and openness than strict procedures. Formed by law enforcement officials, community leaders, and historians committed to conserving the legacy of compassion's straightforward but significant goal was to ensure that every act of kindness now, no matter how minor, would be honored, and that no member of the community's suffering would ever be disregarded. As the weeks went by, months, the effects of what happened at Maplewood Dog Park extended well beyond the town's borders. Similar movements started to emerge in other places as communities started to pay attention, all motivated by the bravery of Maplewood to face its history and change it into a future characterized by compassion for Officer Rivera. Every time he saw Hope soundly dozing beneath the oak tree, he saw more than simply a stray puppy. He saw a living metaphor. His heart, which had been heavy with grief, now beats with the strength of the community. Rivera wrote in the quiet his final report to the task group with the conviction that compassion and truth had won out. "We found the will to confront our greatest losses and the desire to create a better tomorrow through the vigil of one tiny creature." Prior to concluding his report, he made a request that this serve as a reminder to "I implore everyone that every act of kindness, no matter how subtly carried out, has the capacity to transform lives. Community members to keep sharing their tales so that no tear is ever shed in vain and that we never forget." As Maplewood Dog Park and its community progressed into the light, it became clear that healing begins with admitting the truth of a new day, Emma's legacy, Hope's capacity for healing, and the change brought about by a single police officer. That heartbreaking moment served as a timeless testimony, proving that there is always the Dawn's pledge and the fact that compassion may change when we get together. The world.